Thank you very much. Next, we'll have remarks by UNEP's Executive Director, Ms. Inge Andersen. Over to you, Ms. Andersen.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon. Since the adoption of the Paris Agreement 10 years ago, nations have had 3 attempts to hit the mark with their national determined contributions, their NDCs. The initial pledge, the INDC, back in COP15, and then the updates that we saw in Glasgow in 2020, and this year's round of pledges ahead of COP30 in Belém. And each time, we have to say, while the countries have made some stretches, they have collectively landed off target. Each time, they've left the world on course for an intensification of the climate crisis. UNEP's Emissions Gap Report 2025 off target finds that only about 1/3 of parties to the Paris Agreement have submitted new NDCs by 30th of September 2025. And while the new NDCs do show some progress and do narrow the emissions gap, as we just heard from the Secretary General in 2035, these pledges are still not strong enough. Global warming projections over this century are now 2.3 to 2.5 degrees centigrade compared to 2.6 to 2.8 degrees centigrade in last year's report. And that is, of course, far from the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees and well below 2 degree targets. And we must note that methodological updates account for 0.1 degree of the improvement, and the upcoming withdrawal of the US from the Paris Agreement will cancel out around another 0.1 degree. And so the NDCs themselves have made only, we're sorry to say, a marginal difference. As a result, we need unprecedented cuts to greenhouse gas emissions, now in an ever-compressing timeframe and amid a challenging geopolitical context. And let's not forget that the world is not even on track to meet the 2030 pledges. Policies currently in place are pointing the world towards a 2.8 degree warming. This situation means that we must accept the hard truth. The multi-decadal average of global temperatures will overshoot and exceed the 1.5 degrees very likely within the next decade. The task, as we just heard from the Secretary General, is to make that overshoot minimal and temporary. To get on a path to limit that overshoot to about 0.3 degrees, we would need to cut 2030 emissions by 26% and 2035 emissions by 46%. And we would have to deploy, yes, uncertain and risky and costly carbon dioxide removal methods to return to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. This would be difficult, but we have no option but to try, because the bill for the consequences of not trying is far, far greater. Every fraction of a degree matters, and every fraction of a degree avoided reduces an escalation of the climate impacts that are harming all nations and limits the risks of irreversible tipping points. Just as importantly, of course, minimizing overshoot reduces the reliance on carbon dioxide removal. We should not and cannot despair. To the contrary, we must become even more determined. The mitigation potential in wind and solar and forestry remains sufficient to bridge the 2 degree gap in 2035. And for the first time, renewable energy sources surpasses coal as the largest source of electricity in the first half of 2025. 2025. As renewable costs continue to plummet, we have, with the right policies, the opportunity for this to become the new norm, driving jobs, driving opportunities, and driving economic growth. And as UNEP data shows, action is growing to tackle short-lived climate pollutants like methane, which can bring temperatures down quickly. Action like this can help us pull the climate handbrake quickly. This report shows us that we must, and that we cannot forget. This action will deliver stronger economic growth, better human health, more jobs, more energy security, and greater resilience. A future every government should be working towards. Now is the time for all countries, particularly the G20 members, to go all in and invest in their future, so that we can finally start hitting the right climate targets. Thank you.